craft, a luxury or a necessity? In an age of rapid manufacturing, AI and instant gratification, craft is a refreshing counterpoint. It's the creation of objects whose physical form or means of making reflect the human hand and human intelligence. Making in such a way brings people together, supporting economies and preserving local culture. It's about storytelling as much as it's about form and function. This is Monocle on Design.
What craft does is it introduces objects into our lives that really have taken time and expertise and care to produce.
This is Monocle on Design, a show where we discuss everything from architecture and craft to furniture and graphic design. I'm Nic Monisse. On today's program, can collectible craft put the human hand back into design? We discuss the purpose and politics behind Collect 2026 with director TF Chan. Plus, our take on the return of handles and buttons in cars. All that coming up on Monocle on Design. Grace Charlton, Monocle's Associate Editor of Design and Fashion. You're gearing up for Fashion Weeks.
Yeah. Gearing up. Good.
Well, this is it. We've just touched on two things there. So yes, Fashion Week's coming. We're probably going to get to that in the coming episodes. But we're gearing up because Johnny Ive has released a new car, or at least released the interior design of a new car. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, it's with Ferrari. It's the interiors of their very first electric car called Ferrari Luce.
I like this. Ferrari Light?
Yeah, I think that's Italian for light. And it's designed by Love from the design studio that is run by Johnny Ive and Australian excellence Mark Newson. What do you think? I know you like cars. You're at an age where you suddenly care a lot more about the Lamborghinis we spot on Chiltern Street.
I don't. It's a McLaren that I repeatedly spot. It's this gorgeous orange McLaren. I don't know where this has come from. It's like I hit 30 and then all of a sudden cars, I really cared about cars. I'm a guy that used to ride his bike everywhere, prided myself on that. Now all I can think about is getting behind the wheel of that McLaren. But I think there is an element, I hate it so much, but like toys for boys. And yeah, they are just really speaking to me, these supercars. You look at the design of this new Ferrari and they've only revealed the interiors, as I said, and the whole idea is that there's lots of mechanical buttons and dials and toggles and switches, with the idea that they're basically trying to challenge the perception or the idea that electric cars need to be dominated by big touch screens. So we've kind of gone back to, having things you can press and pull and push to get the car going. This is where I'm talking about toys for boys, because on the ceiling of this car, they have a button that literally says launch on it. And the whole idea being that you can pull it, toggle there, and you can pull it and go faster. Where do you land on this?
Yeah, I think the dials are super cute. I don't know, it feels like deeply male behavior to care about.
But hang on, but you I think it's even been on this show, you are a well-documented passenger princess.
Yeah.
Surely you're the one actually that ends up operating so many of these toggles and switches.
No, it's true. And also I was glad to see that. Obviously I get it. And, we don't need more screens in our lives. I don't want to see a huge iPad in the car. But how good is CarPlay? How good is it to just Bluetooth your phone and have the Google Maps up in front of you and, be able to go on Spotify? Like, I agree that it's nice to have like the toggles and the buttons and bring that back a little bit. But also we're not going to regress to paper maps. I don't want to be like on the motorway wondering where the intersection is, with a huge paper map.
Huge paper map. You know what I wonder? I wonder how many relationships have been saved by having Apple CarPlay. I mean, you were just in South Africa with your long-suffering boyfriend. Again, well documented on this show. You were in charge of navigating. Do you think having CarPlay and maps in the car helped?
Game changer, because we've been together for so long. We've been together before CarPlay was invented.
This is crazy.
And we used to drive from London to Edinburgh regularly, and the number of fights we got into because of like turn-offs being missed or something like that, it was bad.
I got my license before I had a smartphone, which really dates me. What I used to do is I used to print out directions for where I was going and just tape it to the front of my steering wheel. So it would be like, take the Kwinana Freeway, get off Alkimos, blah, 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 blah. And I would literally have lefts and rights written down on my steering wheel and just kind of work through the checklist to get to where I was going. And it did work okay. But again, you kind of don't have that ease. But equally, and we've just been talking about your South African adventure, you also had some issues with the car that was potentially too smart.
Yeah, I was in South Africa and we didn't have any fights about directions, but we did have fights about him stalling the car occasionally and then not being able to start it again.
But it was smart tech.
It was smart tech. So I was sitting in the passenger princess seat at the front. We were in the parking lot of a beautiful wine estate, which is quite fancy. And then he was being a little bit of a pushy London driver and he swerved to go and quickly grab a parking spot in front of this other car, proceeded to stall as he was doing that. And the car we were in wouldn't start again because I was in the front seat, in the passenger princess seat. Basically, the car thought that I wasn't buckled in, even though I was buckled in, and he couldn't start the car, and it was this whole thing. I had to get out and apologize to the other guy who was getting really annoyed. This scary South African dude.
Can I be honest? I think that probably makes it worse. I think you should just put the blinkers on in those situations.
No, but I was oh my God, because we were there for the longest 3 minutes of your life trying to figure out how to turn this car on and get it to drive, and it just wouldn't. So I had to get out and quit. And then as I did that, suddenly the car was oh, it's okay, we can start again.
I empathize with this situation because I've had the same thing. I do get really frustrated, and that's what I really like about this car or at least the interiors that Love From have gone for here, because I had this thing at Christmas last year, back home in Perth, at Christmas Mass. I said I would drive everyone home, and I couldn't get my dad's electric car to start for the life of me. Again, there's no key for it anymore. So there's no way of no obvious place where you insert to turn on. So instead, I'm fumbling around the interior, trying to find a button that will turn it on. I eventually do find it. I've been so flustered because it's been a couple of minutes that I don't recognize that I also need to put my foot on the brake and press the button at the same time for the car to start. So we just kind of sat there for 10 minutes. I had to call my dad to ask him how I could get the car to go. And he kind of had to walk me through step by step of all the possibilities. And I think it's this thing. It's okay, so maybe it's embracing tech in certain situations like CarPlay, where you can have a map. But then other times, just give me a key to turn the car on. Yeah,
for sure. Also, because what happens when the iPad breaks down? You know what I mean? What happens when the cloud bursts or what?
This is to be clear, this is a design podcast, not a tech podcast. And I think that comes across in moments.
What if the internet goes down?
What is the internet?
What even is it?
No, but you're right. If these systems crash, I think there's also something to it where even car handles that I often think about this in a Tesla where you don't have a handle to pull on, you have a button to push on. What if the electric in that system fail and I can't open the door? There's all these sorts of things. I think maybe there is this kind of broader shift back to the mechanical, back to what we're seeing with this Ferrari Luce. VW reintroduced buttons back into their designs. China's banned Tesla's handleless cars. I think people want tactility. It's the perfect segue into our first interview, which is with TF Chan, who is the director of Collect, which is presented by the Crafts Council. But tell us a little bit about it.
So it's the only annual art fair on the UK and international circuit that's dedicated to museum quality contemporary craft and design. It's taking place at Somerset House in London until the 1st of March. You spoke to the director of Collect.
Yeah, I think it is super exciting because I think what is taking place there is speaking to kind of broader trends that we've discussed on this show, the rise of collectible design. TF and the team at Collect have done a really good job at kind of repositioning that, explaining the importance beyond it just being beautiful things in our homes. For more on that, let's just go to TF Chan.
Collect is a fair that addresses contemporary craft and design specifically. And when we say craft, we are talking about creative work that's shaped by material intelligence. So the maker, who is often a designer and artist at the same time, knows that material so thoroughly that it's not just about how they manipulate the material, but also the meaning that is carried through it. That's what we're focusing on. A lot of the work ends up being handmade, of course, sometimes with the use of sophisticated machinery, but it is ultimately the skill of the human hand, the time that it takes to develop that skill, the time that it takes to understand the material and really tap into its potential that makes craft distinctive. For us, it goes hand in hand with design because some of the resulting objects are, of course, functional. But we speak of it as collectible design in that they exist not only to serve a function, but also to allow the creator to impart some of their personality, their identity, narrative, or value into it. So it's a celebration of craft and design. It's also insisting on being contemporary. About 80% of the work that you find at the fair is produced within the past 5 years. And a lot of artists actually create new work to show with us as well. So coming to Collect is an opportunity to really encounter the cutting edge of craft and design across a lot of material disciplines, and to really get a sense of what is exciting in different parts of the world as well, because of the wide geographical and cultural variety of exhibitors that participate in our fair.
I'm always wanting to, there's so much good stuff there. I mean, I love the fact that when we're talking craft, we lead with the human hand, but I liked that you talked with material intelligence there, almost first and foremost. I guess what I'm wanting to get to with this discussion, it's let's position, I guess, the importance of craft in a broader context. And maybe material intelligence is the way to go, because there are entire micro economies that come along with this. I mean, you sent me a note saying that, if you use lacquer as a starting point, we're talking about a material here. How can that build whole, I guess, ecosystems?
I use lacquer as an example because we are expecting lots of lacquer-focused presentations at Collect this year, which also sets apart our fair from what we've done previously. But I was in Japan in November as a guest of the National Tourism Organization, and I went to Takaoka City where I visited a lacquer factory and was quite astounded to discover how many hands go into create a piece of lacquer. You may think that it is one material discipline, and therefore a person who specializes in that discipline, who has dedicated their life to perfecting it, would be able to take care of every step of the process. But in fact, it's a very different skill to learn how to do kintsugi, so using gold to create repairs within work, compared to doing radin, which is mother and pearl inlay.
And this is all taking place in the lacquer framework.
Exactly. So all that is within one discipline. And we think of craft as something that's created by a single pair of hands. And sometimes that is indeed the case, but there are also many craft disciplines which require collaboration.
I think that's it. I want to highlight craft's more than just the end product of us having an amazing, beautiful, maybe one-off piece in our home. It's about the broader implications of the work that you're showing here. If we're buying it, we're voting with our pounds, we're voting with our dollars. Is that important too?
Absolutely. It's very easy to buy disposable versions of pretty much everything you can think of. Like any material typology, just type it into Amazon, you'll get a product delivered in a day or two, and it will probably serve your purposes for a month or so. It is good enough, but at the same time, it's not the type of thing that stands the test of time. It's not the type of thing that you would want to pass on to next generations, and definitely not the type of things that actually elevates your quality of life. So what craft does is it introduces objects into our lives that really have taken time and expertise and care to produce. And because you know that there is an artist and maker behind it that's really thought about how to manipulate and collaborate with that material to create something that is distinctive, that might carry a narrative to it, that might introduce us to cultural traditions while also having an element of innovation, then you have this appreciation for what it actually takes to create, say, a box, and you are thinking actively about it. You actually engage with it beyond having it in the backdrop of your life. It might become a conversation piece when you have friends over, and you actually think about the afterlife of the object. If it's reached the end of its useful life for you, you might give it to someone who continues to cherish it. You might pass it down to the next generation. And that's where craft stands apart from within our culture of consumption and within our culture of instant gratification.
I like this idea that it's not the product of hype. It's about time, long form. It's almost slow content, which I quite like, which is incredibly appealing to me.
Absolutely. It's not a shortcut. Like craft always takes time and craft takes investment. And I think that for a while, the reason why so many people, myself included, turned towards mass-produced industrial design was that in an era of prosperity, like you all of a sudden can have all these things like within a flash, and everybody can have furniture of a certain quality in their home that's good enough. But at the same time, within the developed society, it's really important that we're thinking more seriously about the stuff that surrounds us, that we're looking to elevate our quality of life through the objects that we choose to live with. And this is where investing in craft makes a lot of sense.
This is what I like as well, because it's coming back to those different layers that come with an amazingly crafted object. Obviously, obviously you've got those economies, and there's economies of scale within that, whether it's a lacquer workshop or an entire region that's somehow involved in producing something, through to like on that kind of singular personal level, there's a sustainability narrative as well. Because if we have nice things, we want to hang on to them. Is this part of your, I guess, thought process when you're curating the fair?
Absolutely. I think curating is probably a generous word. I organise
the fair. I'd go with it. Organising the fair.
Organising the fair. And we talk about sustainability a lot because sustainability is, of course, looking at supply chains and deciding on what materials you introduce. And certain materials, of course, have a smaller environmental footprint than others. But also, sustainability is defined by the useful life of an object. And if it's so thoughtfully made, if it's so well designed, and if it represents material intelligence, cultural intelligence, if it presents personal meaning to an extent that you want to keep it around for decades and you want to hand it to your children, then the useful life of this object is exceptionally long. And in that case, it's much better to be investing in a piece that stands the test of time in this way, as opposed to buying things that will last you 1 or 2 years.
I think as well, and you've kind of touched on it there, but this whole idea of memory and meaning and having a connection to an object. Again, you kind of mentioned this to me before, but this idea that craft, if we're going to put it in the collectible design world, is about there's the form and function plus an additional thing. It's about what the object says. I mean, why is that important? Can you unpack that a little bit more? This is your idea that I'm pretending to take credit for, which is one of my favourite things to do.
Yeah. I started my career as a design journalist and editor, so I've had plenty of conversations about how good design requires a balance of form and function. You want something to look good. You also want it to be ergonomic and efficient and durable. When we talk about collectible design, we're able to add an additional layer to both form and function. In my view, collectible design is about what an object can actually say. So beyond delivering that aesthetic or functional pleasure and beyond solving problems, it is an expression of the identities and values and the stories behind the hands that have made them and the minds that have conceived them. It's because there's a story behind a piece, because when I ask you about a ceramic artwork on your desk, you have a story to tell about it, that you develop a much closer relationship with this artwork, with this object. You talk about it and you see it as something that you live with rather than something that just exists in the background. It is exciting for the maker, the designer, the artist as well, because then they are occupying a much more important role in our lives. And I think that anybody who cherishes design, by that definition, should also be cherishing craft.
It's disrupting this idea of, that things should be disposable, that, using it and then discarding it is like the way that things are done. It's really flipping things on its head.
Absolutely. There's a really good book on craft, which I've been rereading.
Oh, this is good. We also love recommendations for our listeners.
It was written by the former director of the Museum of Arts and Design in New York, Glenn Adamson. And the title is the best title I could think of for any craft book. It's Fewer, Better Things. And in my mind, that just encapsulates the idea of why crafting is important incredibly well. In a world where we're just saturated with stuff, we do not need more things. We just need to expect more of the things that surround us, and we need to expect more of ourselves when we make decisions as to what to acquire and what to keep. And we need to see the objects that surround us, the artwork that surround us, not only as decorative or functional, but also as testaments to what humans can achieve when we really put our mind to creating something and elevating its quality.
That was Collect's director T.F. Chan. We will return to the second part of that conversation in a little bit, but let's discuss a little bit about what he was saying there. What are your thoughts on collectible design as work that comes with meaning and, as he said, material intelligence? I
think it's, for me, this is about engaging more deeply with the objects that surround us, which again is a long-running theme on this show, but it's this idea that if this material is from somewhere and a particular place, that there's probably a skill set that was developed in that particular place with regards to this particular material. So there's this knowledge built through time and repetition and making. It becomes about more than just a final product, but I guess you start to think about the entire supply chain of something, just inadvertently by understanding, I guess, the qualities of these materials. And I think that was maybe something that even as societies and cultures we were probably doing until relatively recently. Like, I do think we had this deeper understanding of where things were from, perhaps in the past, because it would often be so inherently linked to a place and to a locality where we were from. I mean, I'm always going back to Perth, but, you know, my dad's first desk, which I still hang on to in Perth, is made from carry timber, which is from the forests of southwest Western Australia. And I only know that because it's an ex-government of Western Australia desk. They were all made from carry timber. You have this understanding of, again, of place and craft and of provenance that you're probably not if you're just relying on something from IKEA. But I think this also plays, I guess, into the storytelling side of things, which I think is really a key part of, I guess, collectible design. I mean, we want to hang on to things that tell a story. Does that resonate with you in your own home?
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like you want to associate yourself with people who you appreciate for their skills. I think there's an element of that in terms of like when you're talking about collectible design, like often the designers are quite cool. In terms of my own home, I have a few pieces by my grandfather who was a carpenter, and like similar to you, these are quite simple pieces, but I know exactly where they came from and I know the person who made them. Like it is way more special to have that.
I also like that he says that craft is an antidote to instant gratification, which I think is really nice because, I kind of mentioned IKEA there. I do love IKEA, but I guess it's knowing when and where to rely on it, perhaps. Maybe that's what also this discussion is about, because he talks about craft's ability to elevate our quality of life. Maybe it's also about picking which pieces do need this craft touch.
Or it's funny he said instant gratification, because I think the antidote to that in many ways is just patience. And sometimes I worry that the collectible design discourse can get really out of touch super quickly if it's just like, well, buy the most amazing stuff, and like, but I think, you never have to buy again. But that's easy to say. But if you need a table, like and you don't have the funds for it, you just got to like make do with what you have. Sometimes I grate against this sort of, why don't you just elevate your life? Maybe the elephant in the room is that it's not that easy.
The funny thing is it probably also speaks to a word you've just used then, which is patience. And it is knowing that, maybe it's not having this amazing table right now, but it is something that we've identified is going to improve our quality of life. So let's build and save towards that. I think this is also, a bigger problem within design media. We're obsessed with the news cycle and this idea, we'll talk about a $34.1 million sale at Sotheby's of a hippo bar. And I think that is perhaps not what this is necessarily about. I mean, I even talked to TF about this. There's a full range of prices on show at Collect. Yeah, you can get the high end, but there's also accessible things. I think that's what also makes this Collect show important, because yeah, perhaps we are talking pieces that are quite expensive, but then they're pieces to be lived with and used over the course of a lifetime. It's not necessarily something that's static, that's just going to sit in your home and not be engaged with and not be loved and not be used. And I think that's really the key thing about this, is that the works here are made to be used. They're made to help enhance your quality of life, whether that's a conversation at the dining table or an amazing work of lighting or, some ceramics. This is the other thing I think that maybe we round out on before we go back to TF, but he talked a lot about the fact that lacquer's been a big trend at this year's show. I mean, can you see yourself as a lacquerist?
I love lacquer. It's so alien as a material when you feel it, and it feels so ancient. It's just this high gloss from a resin that's been applied to wood, but it when you feel it at first, it's hard to place. It scares me though, because I feel like I would damage it quite quickly. It's a very delicate material.
But kintsugi is also considered a type of lacquer work. I mean, you could also instantly repair it. Even within one discipline, you have distinct specialisms, such as kintsugi repair, maki using gold or silver powder to decorate lacquer, and raiden, an inlay technique using mother of pearl.
Well, let's listen to the second part of the chat with T.F. Chan, who goes on to discuss the political implications of opting for craft over mass industrial design.
Craft is a perfect antidote to that, because it is not about abstractions. It is very much about real people with real skills, with real livelihoods. And when we are celebrating craft, when we are buying craft, we're actually affirming the belief that society should be organized to support humans and to enable humans to flourish. So that's the political message behind coming to Collect, but also behind collecting and supporting craft. By doing that as well, we are actually showing that craft is important to human well-being in the long term and sending a political message, because the future of craft actually depends on there not just being very skilled and creative craftspeople who then take on the role of artists and designers, but also there needs to be a wider ecosystem where you have good education policy, affordable studios for people who want to make a living out of craft, access to materials and machinery. So paying attention to craft is also saying that these are things that we want in the long term, and therefore our governments should be investing in the infrastructure to enable people to pursue careers in craft.
What I get from this discussion right now is it's to really make you kind of think about the things that you surround yourself with. We define ourselves with the clothes that we wear, with the way that we furnish our own homes, but I think this is also talking about the deeper narrative below each of those things. I think this is the antidote to fast fashion and to fast food and to fast furniture as well, which I think, you know, I don't know anyone that willingly defines themselves by those things, and yet so many of us are consumers of it. So it's a moment to stop and really rethink our own values.
I think the point you made about fast fashion and fast food and so on, that's all very valid, and there was a time when this is absolutely necessary. What I feel is not that people actually need fast fashion in their lives in the long term, is that people haven't yet been given the platform opportunity to see like how things could be done differently. So by giving a platform to contemporary craft and design, we're inviting people to come through the doors of Somerset House to see the types of artworks and objects that are on display and realize that whether it is a vessel on their table, whether it's a mirror, whether it's a box for their precious belongings, there are ways of doing things differently. There are ways of consumption that actually are good for the planet, that support creative ecosystems, and that elevate civilization in the long term.
So can I ask as well, we're just going to get a little off piste here. You've organised the fair. What are you shopping for? What are you going to be keeping your eye out for? What's going to make its way into TF Chan's home, assuming somebody else doesn't snap it up first?
I would say that some of the most exciting pieces at the fair are within the field of lacquer. As I said earlier, we have 4 exhibitors this year who are creating dedicated lacquer presentations, and you can get things that are of exceptional quality, in one case by Yoshito Yamashita, who is one of the only 10 lacquer artists in Japan who has the status of living national treasure. There's also collaborative artwork, so there's another Japanese lacquer master and restorer called Hiroki who has collaborated with 3 contemporary British artists to create these pieces together, and through their collaboration you also see a story of cultural exchange. Collect is very international, so I should go beyond Japan and speak about work from other places as well. We have a solo presentation by the Ghanaian ceramic artist Kubina Adusa, who was shortlisted in the Loewe Foundation Craft Prize last year, and his totemic vessels draw from West African craft traditions and reflect on how the earth that we walk on actually carries all these stories and this ancestral weight. On the more emerging side, I'm excited to have a presentation by Max Radford Gallery, which is London-based, has been championing the work of emerging design talent that often creates work with their own hands. So we have the work of Louis Kemino, for instance, who creates patchwork wooden furniture that often incorporates the offcuts of exotic timbers. As you can see, it's quite a wide range of talents that we have included in the fair, and that's the idea as well. There are people who come to us who are already collectors of ceramics, so collectors of glass and collectors of textiles, and we want them to see stuff that they love, but also to help them look at adjacent disciplines as well and discover that there's so many creative dialogues happening across the world of craft.
That was TF Chan, Director of Collect. Nic, is there a piece of collectible design that you are lusting after for your home?
This is airing before Collect opens, so I'm going to have to wait until I go this weekend. But in the meantime, there is something that I really want that I think does fall into collectible design that does touch on a lot of what TF has talked about here. I've got two mates. One of them owns a farm. One of them is an amateur woodworker. So, okay, probably not falling into the professional level that maybe is going to be on show at Collect. But basically, I want a tree felled from my friend's farm, like they come down, to be collected by my friend. Yeah, see, I've used the word there. To be collected by my friend Nick, who could then turn it into a beautiful side table for me. And I think that would be an amazing thing to have in my home, because it has a bit of a story behind it, provenance. There's material intelligence built into it as well, and it's supporting a very, very, very small economic ecosystem. But that is all for today's show, and I will let you know if I get that stool. For more design stories, pick up a copy of Monocle magazine. Today's episode was produced and edited by Hassan Anderson and Elliot Greenfield. I'm Nic Monisse.
I'm Grace Charlton.
Thanks for listening.